This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Welcome to News 9 and you are watching On Point. Today we have 3 On Points. In the first On Point, we look at how Defence Minister Rajnath Singh called out China's bluff as India refused to sign the final declaration at the SCO Defence Ministers meet. In the second On Point, we look at how Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei views the war and ceasefire with Israel. In the third On Point, we look at Zohran Mamdani, set to be the first Muslim mayor of New York City. Now let's take a quick look at the headlines. Dragon spacecraft docks at International Space Station. Subhanshu Shukla and crew welcomed at ISS. Rain trigger landslides at several places in Himachal Pradesh. Orange alert issued. IMD issues red alert in Kerala. Heavy rains hit Wayanad, Malappuram and Idukki. Temple demolished in Dhaka. Idols bulldozed 2 days after mob issued an ultimatum. Terrorists killed in ongoing operation in Udhampur's Basantgarh. Actor Krishna arrested in Chennai drug case after surrendering. Five tigers died due to alleged poisoning in Karnataka's Mahadeshwara Wildlife Sanctuary. Manikam Tagore takes sharp barb at Tharoor day after his statement. Anti-Corruption Bureau registers case against Saurabh Bharadwaj, Satyen Jain and alleged corruption in government hospital projects. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Thursday declined to sign the joint document at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Defence Ministers meeting in Qingdao in China. Look at these visuals. These visuals are the most defining moment when India's Defence Minister called out China's bluff and he refused to sign it. The joint document failed to mention the April 22nd Pahalgam terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir, but included references to unrest in Balochistan. The Defence Minister called out China's double standards on terrorism at meeting. Singh said peace and prosperity cannot coexist with terrorism and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of terror group. Slamming the international community's inconsistent approach towards terrorism, Singh said SCO must not hesitate to criticize nations who harbor terrorists. India's firm stand meant the bloc, which includes Pakistan, China and Russia, did not issue a final declaration.
I believe that the biggest challenges that we are facing in our region are related to peace, security and the trust deficit. And the root cause of these problems is increasing radicalization, extremism and terrorism. Excellency, peace and prosperity cannot coexist with terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of the mass destruction in the hands of the non-state actors and the terror groups. Dealing with these challenges require decisive action, and we must unite in our fight against these evils for our collective safety and security. It is imperative that those who sponsor, nurture and utilize terrorism for their narrow and selfish ends must bear the consequences. Some countries use cross-border terrorism as an instrument of policy and provide shelter to terrorists. There should be no place for such double standards. SCO should not hesitate to criticize such nations.
Without naming Pakistan, Singh highlighted the recent Pahalgam terror attack, noting that its execution closely resembled previous operations by Lashkar-e-Taiba.
On 22nd April 2025, the terror group, the Resistance Front, carried out a dastardly and a heinous attack on the innocent tourists in Pahalgam, in the Indian state of the Jammu and Kashmir. 26 innocent civilians, including a Nepali national, were killed. Victims were shot after they were profiled based on the religious identity. The Resistance Front, which is a proxy of UN-designated terror group Lashkar-e-Taiba, claimed responsibility for the attack. In exercising its right to defend against terrorism and preempt as well as deter further cross-border terrorist attacks, India on 7th May 2025 successfully launched Operation Sindoor to dismantle cross-border terrorist infrastructure. We reiterate the need to hold the perpetrators, organizers, financiers, and sponsors of reprehensible acts of terrorism, including cross-border terrorism, accountable and bring them to justice.
In a press meet, the Ministry of External Affairs said that India wanted concerns related to terrorism reflected in the joint statement, which was not acceptable to a particular country. That is why the statement was not adopted.
We had Raksha Mantri, our Defence Minister, participating in the Defence Ministers meeting of SCO. This meeting happened over 2 days, that is yesterday and today. The Defence Ministers meeting has concluded. I understand that they could not adopt a joint statement. I also understand that certain member countries could not reach consensus on certain issues, and hence the document could not be finalized. On our side, India wanted concerns on terrorism reflected in the document, which was not acceptable to one particular country, and therefore the statement was not adopted. He also urged all SCO members. He said that we must, in lockstep in our endeavor, we must all be in lockstep in our endeavor in strengthening stability and security in our neighborhood.
India's refusal to sign the statement aligns with earlier decision at the multilateral platforms. The statement would have weakened India's position on terrorism and regional security. In a related development, Chinese President Xi Jinping is likely to skip the BRICS summit for the first time in 12 years, being hosted in Rio de Janeiro. According to South China Morning Post, Brazil's invitation to Prime Minister Modi for a state dinner following the BRICS summit may have influenced China's decision. On this topic, I am joined by Ambassador Stobden. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me, and Professor Swaran Singh from Center for International Politics, JNU. Ambassador, my first question to you is that what is the future of SCO if it behaves partially in a motivated way? And was this sort of a resolution, sir, expected in a sort of multilateral fora like this?
SCO has always been a China-driven organization. We thought Russia will assert, because there are 10 members now. I can understand with the language of the declaration, along with Pakistanis and the Chinese, but why other 8 countries are not objecting to the issue. So we just had 5 Central Asian countries. We had a summit with them. I don't know what they said on Sindoor, but certainly this is a Rajnath Singh ji has said the politically correct thing. The point boils down to diplomacy. If the joint statement is not adopted, I cannot say it's good for us or bad for us. it's as good as nothing. So clearly, you have to see the implication. How many there are other details. How many countries have endorsed the Pahalgam incident or not? Those are the issues. But I think politically it's correct. It sells in our country that we stood up against terrorism, and the issue of Balochistan, I believe, was figuring in the statement which we put up there, and the Pakistanis objected. So those are the things, and it was expected. When I was in the system, I objected the India becoming SCO member, but then the political decision was that we should be there in the organization. So I don't understand why should we be there if our interest is not served just for the sake of being there. It's something we have not really thought about it. I see the implication overall in the policy analysis around the world is that India is an obstructionist, playing a negative role in the SCO. These are the attribution which I think most of the countries led by China or Pakistanis will be putting up in the next 2-3 days. So after SARC, you now SCO and the BRICS and all those stuff, which I keep reading here and there. But from our point of view, this is a correct decision.
Okay. Professor Singh, what is the big picture?
I think very clearly, I agree with Ambassador Stobden. China is seen as a leading light in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But being a leading light or being a host, it has clearly failed to sustain the credibility of that organization, because SCO works on consensus basis. And if the host country and so-called leader of SCO has not been able to produce a consensus document, it reflects both on the organization and the host country. That is my first point. Second, as far as Ambassador Stobden mentioned about India should not be in SCO, I think I am at disagreement on that. India has been the leading voice on dealing with issues of terrorism, both at the regional level, 1987 Anti-Terror Convention that was signed by SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Organization, and from 1994 at United Nations, India has been a leading player trying to build a global countering terrorism convention. So in that sense, India is a leading voice on counterterrorism. And if Shanghai Cooperation Organization that was set up in 2001 to deal with issues of terrorism, in fact, in Uzbekistan, they had set up a anti-terror structures called RATS, which fundamentally works on issues of terrorism. I think India fully deserves to be there. But the fact that, in a very, very myopic preoccupation with Pakistan, a mention of Balochistan, where on 10th of May, a terror attack took place and I think 3 children died, was made, but no mention of Pahalgam, which led to 26 people being, first of all, identified in terms of their religious leanings and then killed, and that leading to a military confrontation between 2 member states of Shanghai Cooperation Organization is not mentioned. I mean, this is really strange to see that kind of a document coming out of Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting hosted in China, which shows that China has become virtually blind by its friendship with Pakistan and
Absolutely.
is not worried about the credibility of organization. Forget about its relationship with the second most important country in SCO today, which is India, the 4th largest economy,
Absolutely.
largest neighbor in terms of the population, largest democracy, and so on. And fundamentally, therefore, to me, it's more than India-China relations, it's China's failure to ensure credibility of Shanghai Cooperation Organization by presenting a picture which should be acceptable to all the member
Absolutely.
states. And I think it's a failure of the host country.
But there is also one more thing, Ambassador Stobden. Was Sharmul Sheikh draft a sort of a historical blunder where Balochistan first made its appearance, sir? Ambassador?
Yeah, I think they tried to put on us these accusations. But in a very smart way, we have brought up this Balochistan, and I see the reaction in Balochistan. People are so happy about India's position at the SCO. just an initial step, but that's the only answer. I always believe that counterterrorism cannot be an administrative solution of airstrike and missile strike. It has to be geopolitical, and Balochistan is the correct political answer to what the Pakistanis are doing either in Kashmir or elsewhere, because they understand only this language, not just Balochistan but also Pashtunistan. And these are the issues that India should be playing up with, not purely military response to, because terrorism is an ideological issue. You cannot have a military answer to terrorism perfectly. 9/11 was totally different, the American global war against terror. But in our own regional context, it's the geopolitics. You have to, it's not purely terrorism, but it's mixed with certain issues. That's why I think from Indian point of view, the Balochistan, not being allowed to figure in this statement is something very exciting. I'm looking forward to writing something about this. It's a great thing. At least a chapter is now being opened on this front.
The chapter is being opened on this front. But Professor Singh, the question is that over a period of time, the stand of China diplomatically, militarily has hardened towards India. Is there any scope that both countries can have normal relationship? Or do you think that the China has taken a position which is anti-India?
Karthikeya, I think you made a very brilliant point here, because this was the first visit of India's defense minister after 2020. China should have utilized this important opportunity to streamline a lot of things between India and China. And defense ministers are usually the last ones to visit each other when there are tensions. You could have foreign ministers visiting first time, education and sports ministers visiting there. China in that sense should have used this opportunity of Rajnath Singh, India's defense minister, being in Beijing to sort out many other issues which would have accelerated the building of peace on the borders between India and China. But obviously, as I'm saying, that China apparently seems to be in this case blinded by its friendship with Pakistan. And it looks like some of the sections were dictated by Pakistan as to what should be mentioned and what should not be mentioned. It will surprise any observer from any part of the planet to see this joint statement coming soon after a military confrontation between India and Pakistan that was triggered by attack in Pahalgam, not making mention even indirectly of that, and then particularly making mention of Balochistan. So I think it's a clear failure of China as a leader of SCO, as a host of SCO meeting of defense ministers. And India has stood firm that terrorism is something that India will not tolerate. And I think recently the Indian Prime Minister clarified India's approach to issues of terrorism as to how India will deal with these things without even worrying about nuclear blackmail and so on. And therefore, I think initially the terrorism, if it sustains and continues to threaten a country's national security, will have to be dealt militarily. But I understand ultimately it will have to be dealt in terms of diplomatic dialogue. But it takes two sides to do that dialogue. I mean, if one side is really not willing to strike a conversation or create an environment for talks, then one country cannot unilaterally start a kind of a conversation without appropriate environment being built for.
I think you have made a very important point, sir. In fact, the Prime Minister has gone out and, either you can quote Wuhan Conversation Summit or Mamallapuram. I think Prime Minister went out of his way to accommodate Xi Jinping, even the one-to-one summit in Ahmedabad. But I don't think it fructified because the Chinese intention was clear that their position is not going to change.
Is that question to me, Karthikeya?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Indeed, I think that is what is significant to understand, that Chinese heart of heart at their subconscious level see India as a competitor, and I think that makes them very uncomfortable in dealing with India, in building some kind of dialogue which is proactive and positive. And that sense of India being seen as a competitor also makes them really very, very concerned when India is welcomed in Southeast Asia by ASEAN countries or welcomed in the Indo-Pacific framework or befriended by countries like United States and various European countries, that is invariably interpreted in Beijing as anti-Beijing, which is not how it is. India keeps repeatedly underlining India's engagement with Western multilateral organizations is neither anti-Western nor anti-China. When India joins BRICS, India joins SCO, it's not anti-Western nations. When India joins the Indo-Pacific framework, it's not anti-China. India's multilateralism is guided by multi-alignment, where India seeks to build, positive economic partnerships in as many sectors with as many countries as possible, with focus on Viksit Bharat. And therefore, we don't hold any relationship hostage to any other country in that sense, and that is clarified ad nauseum at all levels by India. But Chinese somehow continue to be suspect of India's credentials,
Yes.
as far as anti-China policies.
Ambassador,
and that makes them miss several opportunities to engage India in a very proactive and
so Ambassador, my question to you is that despite no historical enmity and China always taking India as an adversary, where does this stem from? Is it from the colonial experience? Is it from the Tibet issue? Where does it stem from, where India has always made its position clear, went out of its way at its own cost to accommodate China historically during Nehru's tenure? Where does this basic India fear in China stems from, sir?
My understanding of what the Chinese think about India is that most of the Chinese, I'm not an expert on China, but the mindset that I understand is that unless the Chinese play hardball with India, India doesn't relent. I mean, even post Galwan or post Doklam or whatever, the diplomacy, the kind of negotiation we have seen, the prolonged ones on disengagement at the LOC, border issues, and all these things, that there are no element of soft. Relenting, the Chinese showing certain softness towards India. Possibly this is also, in response to how India looks at China. So that ice has not been broken. And mainly, as you rightly said, there are no trust between the two countries. And the Wuhan process was the initiative was made in Wuhan, but that was derailed. It's not India, China alone. There are many factors come in. China playing against India or India playing against China. That's too simplistic. There are global issues. There are American factors. There are many other factors which we don't really articulate as if that we do everything according to our own interests. No, we are aligned with many other issues. Therefore, those considerations are very important. So there is it's a continuing since 1960s. We have also a very strong thrust against the Chinese, whether we like it or not. Very hard position that we maintain. So I think the Chinese response is doubly hard. I would say, because my conversation with many Chinese people, scholars, diplomats, is that we understand the Americans, we understand the Arabs and the Russians and the Muslim world, but with India it's very different. So I think it's a psychological issue. It's a issue of understanding each other. Most people do not understand China also. Our understanding of China is very poor. China is good or bad is not an issue. Whether you are able to negotiate with the Chinese, that's the skill you require. The Americans here, just see, Trump has said, I've struck a deal with the Chinese on the rear earth. So they do it. They don't see from bad or good. They just get the deal done. So we have a position that no, when it comes to China, everything is no. So
I think that's a fair point.
I think the Chinese also have the same position on us.
I think that's a fair point, but the bottom line of this conversation is that this SCO came out to be a cropper, and Rajnath Singh refused to sign the joint draft because it mentioned obviously Balochistan. The draft did not mention Pahalgam, and I think it shows us that the whatever back channel operations had happened, the thaw between India and China has not taken place. Thank you both of you for joining me on this show. So this was on point 1. In this next on point, after the break, we will look at how Iran's supreme leader has declared victory over Israel.
देखना इन आंखों को अभी एक ख्वाब बाकी है, सुननी इस दुनिया को मेरी खामोशी की आवाज बाकी है। समझते थे जिसे वो मुकाम मेरा, होना वहां से मेरा आगाज बाकी है। टाटा मोटर्स प्रस्तुत करता है अब मेरी बारी TV9 नेटवर्क के साथ। कर लीजिए सपनों को साकार करने की तैयारी, कहेंगे आप भी जल्द अब मेरी बारी।
सर, पेन रिलीफ के लिए
ये देखो, ये काफी है।
2 हफ्ते का टूर है, कहीं कम ना पड़ जाए।
दुबे जी, ये छोटा सा डायनापार QPS प्लस आपके 2 स्प्रे के बराबर है।
पेश है डायनापार QPS प्लस।
लगा के देखो, मान जाओगे।
डायनापार QPS प्लस।
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding.
सोच कर, समझ कर, इन्वेस्ट कर।